The greatest knight in this story's lore lived over a century before the current books and show begin, but the characters we all know still look back to this man as the pinnacle of knighthood and what a Kingsguard member should be. His name was Prince Aemon Targaryen, and no, not Maester Aemon who was up at the wall, but the man he was named after. At 17, he was sworn into his uncle's Kingsguard in 153 AC. This was the same year the last dragons under their control went extinct, well until Daenerys was able to hatch her own around 150 years later. The Targaryens had two ancestral Valyrian steel swords, one called Blackfire, usually given to a Targaryen king or heir, and another smaller one called Dark Sister, that's just given to Targaryens who are worthy of Valyrian steel. Aemon was one of these Targaryens who wielded Dark Sister. After Aemon's uncle, King Aegon III died, Aemon's cousin Daeron was next in line to rule. Daeron was this young and ambitious king who wanted Dorne to finally be a part of the Seven Kingdoms to complete the Targaryens' conquering. People advised Daeron to avoid starting a war since the Targaryens no longer had any dragons, but he continued with this conquest. Aemon accompanied his cousin along with some other Kingsguard members and were successful at first. During the invasion of Dorne, an assassination was attempted on King Daeron, but Aemon was fast enough to get in front of the poisoned arrow aimed at his cousin. He survived the attack, but had to be sent back to King's Landing for a while so he could recover. This is a huge theme for Aemon's character. He's completely selfless and takes his duty very seriously. Since he survived the poisoned arrow, it was time to get back to Dorne to help out in the invasion. Aemon was a hero for saving the king, people were calling the young dragon, but his fighting capabilities became renowned after defeating a Dornish champion when he returned to Dorne. But all the victories they were having came to a crashing end. Under the agreement of a peaceful meeting, King Daeron the young dragon was killed even with 5 of his Kingsguard around him. They were completely outnumbered. 3 members were killed fighting and trying to defend Daeron. One threw down his sword and yielded, and Aemon was captured and taken as a hostage. Aemon was taken injured, but not before being able to take down 2 men. Daeron had no children, so his younger brother Baelor was next to rule. While Dorne had the Dragonknight captive, there were some Dornish hostages in King's Landing. King Baelor was this overly religious man who decided to walk to Dorne barefoot to return the hostages and make some kind of peace agreement. When he came across his cousin Aemon, he was locked away naked in a cage. Baelor wasn't able to free him, but promised he would return to him after speaking with the Prince of Dorne, and he kept his promise. After returning the Dornish hostages and finally being able to make peace, Aemon was allowed to be free. But instead of just letting him go, Baelor was given a key to Aemon's cage that was placed above a pit of vipers. Aemon begged him to leave, but Baelor believed that his gods would protect him and was unfazed by the snakes. He walked into the pit and made his way to the cage, and though he opened it, he nearly collapsed before Aemon was able to open the door and pull his cousin from the pit. Aemon put Baelor on his back, climbed the top of the cage, and jumped out of the pit to safety. He was able to do this after being locked away in the hot desert for a very long time. With his cousin on his back, Aemon continued to cross the desert until he made it to safety. Sometime under the rule of Baelor, Aemon was promoted to Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. The pious Baelor would at times go on these long fasts for his religious beliefs, and in one of these fasts, he didn't eat for 41 days and ended up dying. Like his brother, he didn't have any children, so next in line to rule was Aemon's father, King Viserys II. Viserys spent a very long time being hand of the king, since Aegon III, and when it finally became time for him to rule, he would die from an illness after only a year in power. But way before his sudden death, Viserys decided to have his eldest son, Aegon IV, marry his only daughter, Naerys. Aemon never got along with his older brother, but was very close with his younger sister. It's always been rumored that Aemon was actually in love with his sister, and she shared in these feelings. It's a common practice for the heir to marry his sister since they want to keep their bloodline as pure as possible. I'm sure it has to do a lot with magic and dragon control. This marriage really bothered Aemon, and they supposedly had some sort of fight or argument during the wedding, and the night ended with Naerys weeping. It was only after the wedding that Aemon joined the Kingsguard, and if you know anything about this order, like the Night's Watch, they don't marry, hold any lands, and serve till death. So this rumor could have very well been true. Aegon, who has been given the nickname of the Unworthy, was a horrible king, and an even worse husband. Naerys was always small and fragile, so giving birth to their heir was difficult for her, and their maester warned another childbirth could kill her. Naerys asked Aegon, since they now have an heir, can they just live as siblings and not as husband and wife? Even though Aegon admitted to never loving Naerys, he refused her request, and they would try to have more children. She would have one more child, their daughter Daenerys, but also some stillbirths. Until finally, she did die in childbirth like the maester warned. She was miserable with Aegon, but found happiness through Aemon and her son Daeron II. Aegon the Unworthy once forbade his brother from participating in a tourney because he wanted to name one of his many mistresses the Queen of Love and Beauty, which is a tradition in tourneys, and he knew if Aemon entered, he would win and name Naerys instead. Well, Aemon disguised himself as a mystery knight called the Knight of Tears and entered anyways so his sister wouldn't be disgraced by Aegon. With his skill, he outfought everyone and was successful in honoring his sister. Even Daeron II had his problems with his father. He was always closer with his uncle Aemon. The fact that he was close with his uncle, and all the rumors about Aemon and Naerys, some believed Daeron to actually be Aemon's son, and not Aegon's. A knight once accused Naerys of adultery and treason, and Aemon came to her rescue by fighting a trial by combat for her innocence. It seems like Aegon may have also believed these rumors about this since he gave the ancestral Valyrian steel sword Blackfyre to one of his bastards instead of his own heir Daeron. It's also possible that Aegon started these rumors, like one maester in the story claims. But with all the tension in the family, Aemon remained loyal and protected his brother from danger. Aegon had another one of the Kingsguard named Terence Toyne brutally killed after he found him in bed with his current mistress. Terence's two brothers tried to avenge him by killing Aegon the Unworthy, but were stopped by Aemon. Aemon saved his brother, but died in this altercation. You would think Aegon would feel guilty after being responsible for the deaths of both his siblings, but he only continued making remarks about their love affair. This didn't hurt their memory, however. They would be remembered in songs and stories that detail their tragic lives, and Aemon the Dragonknight's heroism. It was Daeron II who named his grandson Aemon, after Aemon the Dragonknight in memory of his beloved uncle. I go into some more detail about Aegon the Unworthy, and how he almost tore the Seven Kingdoms apart in my last video if you haven't checked that out. Hope you found this character lore video enjoyable. I'll see you guys soon.